All right. For your first question, Jenna, what types of large animal experience do you have?
I feel like I didn't realize it when I first started thinking about applying for vet school and wanting to work with large animals professionally as a veterinarian, but I do have a lot of large animal experience. My grandfather raised Belgian Blues and Angus cattle for about 50 years, so I have a lot of experience with working with large animals in that aspect of working with animal husbandry and working with cattle specifically in that setting. Um, he would take us with him at about 5 a.m. in the morning to feed the cattle, as well as taking care of calves that had been rejected by their mothers and preparing them ultimately to be sold. I feel like also throughout my high school career, I have worked a lot with large animals in the aspect of goats and sheep, which are really more so thought of as livestock, though some people do have animals that are like goats for pets. But in that aspect, we would take care of the goats in the aspect of worming and feeding, as well as taking them to the show and understanding how to present them to make the areas that meat is harvested from look good. So in that aspect, I kind of understand the industry portion of that. As well as working in a mixed practice clinic, I've had a lot of experience working with horses as well as sheep and goats. And they have been more in a domestic kind of sense. So owners would bring us their goats, and they're more like pets, right? They're more domestic. So the owners would bring us their pets and more of an interest in how to keep their pet alive rather than how to keep their livestock alive. So I feel like that's a very important aspect of large animals, and understanding how they're considered, if they're livestock or if they're pets, because that depends on what you use to treat them or what the owner wants you to treat them with. Large animals, I have worked with horses in a veterinary setting and kind of understanding that they're prey animals and understanding that even though they are considered domestic and we've domesticated horse and cattle and things like that for over thousands of years, they're still prey animal and they still have a personal boundary that you need to be able to respect to work with those animals, no matter what they're being used for or what they're bred for. So I feel that working with cattle has kind of shown me the aspect, both I've worked with dairy here at NC State, one of NC State's education units. I've worked with dairy cattle and seeing the difference between dairy cattle and beef cattle and how they're both used in the industry and how veterinary medicine benefits both sides and understanding which ways to give vaccines that are different from domesticated animals, because you don't want to give a vaccine in an animal that is used for meat in one of their meat areas. So I feel that learning a lot about large animals has been learning about how they are animals of prey, and in order to treat them well, you have to respect their boundaries. So I feel that that is the main overall thing that I feel like I've learned with my extensive experience with large animals.
Okay, Jacob, go ahead and tell us about your favorite and least favorite professor.
Okay, so my favorite professor was my Intro to Animal Science professor. He was this was the first animal science class I ever took as a freshman at NC State. So, like in high school, we didn't really have much because I lived in a really like urban place growing up. So we didn't have a lot of like outreach where I could go and like get a lot of quality time with animals. So that lecture was like the very first time I could like jump in and learn about animal science. And it was very nice because he was really enthusiastic about what he was teaching. Like he seemed really excited and really passionate about what he was teaching, which really goes a long way for the students because it allows the students to also get excited for what he's teaching. And along with that, he also cared about the students. Like he made effort to try and get to know everyone's names. And by maybe like the first month, like I was in the class, he knew who I was. Because I came to see him after class and he called me by my first name. And that also went a long way because it made me feel like more than just like a head in a classroom. Like we felt like we had like a connection and like he really cared about me. So like I said, I'm gonna go see him after class because it was a hard class, but it was very like the fact that he was enthusiastic like kept me excited. And when I went to go see him after class, he was very approachable. He made it seem like my questions weren't like small, and he didn't make me like he didn't talk down on me because he knew more than me, and he like was understanding that like this is my first time ever like learning about animal science, so I might not be as knowledgeable as him. Um, so yeah, unlike my least favorite, which I'll go into later, he was very nice and really understanding that I wasn't as like smart as he was in that area. So my least favorite professor was also in my first semester as a freshman in college, and it was my intro to biology professor. She was very different from my animal science professor. She was not approachable at all. I went to go see her after class one time because I didn't understand the topic that she was discussing, and she like talked down on me and made it seem like my question was really like too like stupid for her, and that I was supposed to know this even though as like a new college student I was just struggling and wanted help. And she didn't make an effort to get to know any of us. In fact, when I went to go see her and ask her a question, she called me out for being loud and disruptive in the back of the class, even though I didn't sit in the back of the class. She just made this up thinking that she knew who I was, when she really didn't. And by the end of the year, she didn't know my name like my other animal science professor did, even though she taught a smaller class. So that like lack of like care for students really like I like made the class like a lot harder for me and like really ruined the experience. She also didn't seem like to prioritize her class because she also had a research opportunity, and she like would always bring up her research in her class, which isn't a bad thing, but she would test us on her research and really go off on tangents about it and wasn't really sticking to the class content. So when I was getting tested on things that she wasn't going over in class, I didn't seem that as fair because I did all this learning and studying of what she taught in class, and then getting a bad letter grade for my final score for the class wasn't representative of all the hard work I put in. So I feel like that her teaching that class really ruined biology for me that first semester, and she could have done a lot better job with that.
Okay, Jenna, for your next question, describe a unique case at a clinic and what you learned from it.
I have had an opportunity to work at the same mixed practice clinic since I was in high school. I did an internship there and they ended up hiring me on. And it seems like even though we're a private practice mixed practice clinic, we see a lot of unusual cases. So this one case really stuck with me from over the summer this past year. There was a dog that we had some clients bring in, and she was pregnant, and they said that she had started labor a little earlier, and she had already passed 4 puppies that did not survive, unfortunately. The dog was having a really hard time. She was having a hard time breathing. She was having a hard time relaxing, constantly pacing around the room, was bleeding from her vulva. So we took the dog in. We talked with the owners. They said that she had just started labor a little bit ago. The puppies had passed, and things like that. So my veterinarian palpated the dog and came up with the idea to go ahead and do an x-ray on her to be able to see if there were any puppies that were stuck inside. So we ended up doing an x-ray, and there were 2 visible fetuses that were inside of the dog. You could see their spinal column and their skulls. So we ended up not knowing if there were more, deciding that it would be a good idea to go ahead and perform a C-section on this dog since she had already been in labor for so long. The problem there was we had to assess that the financial situation of that client. The dog had not previously been spayed. This was an accidental pregnancy due to the clients not having the money to be able to spay the dog. So we talked to the clients. We kind of formed out a plan of what they would be able to pay now and what they would have to pay later for us to perform the C-section on the dog, because unfortunately sometimes it does come down to that kind of financial need and whether the dog gets what it needs because of the owners not being able to. So we kind of worked with them a little bit on helping with that financial situation and still helping the dog. So we ended up doing a C-section on the dog, and myself and another technician were ready to take the 2 puppies that we knew were in there. It only turned out to be 2 puppies because sometimes it's a little hard to tell from the x-ray how many are in there. And thinking that we were going to be able to revive the puppies, we had towels, we were going to start rubbing them, and unfortunately both of the puppies that we were able to take out of the mom were deceased. So they had ended up being in there for a really long time, and they were basically decaying within the mother, which was causing all of her problems. So unfortunately those puppies didn't make it past the C-section, but the mother did. So like understanding kind of how this whole aspect works, it's kind of this emergency situation as kind of what I learned. Like going from diagnostics to the C-section within a couple hours was something that I feel like in a lot of practices you don't have that kind of experience within a private practice. So learning how to go from step A to step B and then finally to the conclusion of helping the animal. And though it was a little disappointing that the puppies didn't make it and that they did not survive through the surgery was a little disheartening, but kind of understanding that the mother did make it through, and she ended up being spayed within that process, so we knew that she wasn't going to have a situation like this again, and that she would just have a better quality of life. So kind of understanding that though it didn't happen perfect and we didn't save those 2 puppies due to them already being deceased, understanding that we did help make a difference in that pet's life, and we did help to diagnose and go through all of the steps and to be able to help that dog and that family.
Okay, Jacob, how do you deal with stress, and have you ever lost your cool?
So throughout middle school and high school, I ran cross country and track, and that was a really big part of my life, and it still is now. I run on the club team for NC State, and that has allowed me to like keep up with my running, and like I have friends that I can do it with. And so when I get stressed, I usually just drop what I'm doing and go for a run, because like that getting that exercise allows you to lower your stress levels. And then for me personally, when I'm out running, I'm kind of just like I'm like by myself, and I can think and just really clear my head, because I could be like wherever I'm at, like I could be at my apartment, I could be at the library. If I'm ever stressed, I can just drop what I'm doing, go put on my running shoes, and just like go from like wherever I am. And this one specific place near my apartment, there's just a lot of just like open like farm road, and I'm running by cow pastures and a lot of just like really open areas, and it's really calming for me, and I get to just like see all these animals that like I've worked with, and it's like really therapeutic for me, and I can just unload what's like been going on, what's been stressing me out. And then what also helps me is if I make a list of everything that I need to do. If I feel overwhelmed with assignments, tests, projects, I can sit down and then make a little note on my like desk or on like my computer, and I can just plan out every day of the week and what homework I have and what things I should start working on. And it helps me just like see everything that's on my plate, and allows me to understand that I'm not going to miss anything, because I feel like a lot of that stress for me personally comes from not being on top of everything that I'm doing with school, work, extracurriculars. So being able to have all that down and plan a schedule, it eliminates a lot of that stress for me personally, because I know that I'm not going to miss anything, or nothing's going to like be due when I'm not ready for it. And because of that, I've never lost my cool, because I'm really good at implementing these. I'm good at like figuring out, like knowing when I'm going to be stressed, and I can catch myself like when I'm starting to freak out, and then just go ahead and either run or jot down everything I have to do before it gets to the point where I lose my cool.
Okay, and for your last question, Jenna, what do you think of euthanasia?
I think that unfortunately euthanasia is sad, but it is a necessary procedure within the field of veterinary medicine. I have worked at this clinic that I mentioned before for about 3 years now, and I've seen and helped with a lot of euthanasias on many different types of species, dogs, cats, horses, things like that. I remember this one specific case. A dog came into us, and it was like a known client's dog, and it ended up having a prolapsed anus, which is a very rare and very rare event of something like that happening. So we ended up having to talk with the owner, and I think that usually euthanasias fall into one of two categories, where the animal's in pain and there isn't enough money there financially to be able to pay for expensive surgeries or expensive treatments for that animal, or where the animal is suffering so much that it really doesn't have a quality of life despite what we're going to do to try and to keep it alive. So there is one type of euthanasia I really don't believe in, which is convenient euthanasias, where owners are going to bring their animal in to be put down because they just don't want it anymore. I don't really believe in that. But back to the situation with the dog with the prolapsed anus, the owner really didn't have the funds to be able to afford an expensive surgery to be able to correct that. So unfortunately, instead of referring him off to the specialty hospital that would have taken him and tried to repair that for us, we ended up talking with the client and assessing what his financial situation was, and unfortunately we had to put that dog down, since without a surgery that would correct something like that, the dog really would not have a quality of life. There was another situation where we had a dog that was a 9-month-old Boston Terrier puppy. He had just been hit by a car, and he had been hit pretty bad. He was struggling really hard. We did some measures to try and save him, and then our veterinarian talked with the client and ended up making the decision to euthanize him rather than to continue to perform care to try to keep him alive for a few more hours, since the animal was suffering pretty badly and there really wasn't anything that us or the owner could do to be able to save that animal. So unfortunately, where it is very sad, it is necessary sometimes. When an animal's quality of life drops so low that they can't get up and eat, they can't get up and perform their regular tasks, I feel that euthanasia is necessary, though it's not the fun part or the glamorous part of the job, and I'm pretty sure no one enjoys doing them. I feel that it is necessary within the field.
Okay, Jacob, for your final question, what are the pros and cons of social media in veterinary medicine?
Well, I feel like with social media now, it's a lot more popular, and it's like still increasing, like the amount of people who are on it. Because like there are more and more young people are getting on it, and then now it's also expanded to a lot of companies and a lot of businesses. So I believe that a vet's office could really benefit from using social media to represent their business. There's a lot of negatives that could happen, but I feel like the way to avoid these negatives is to really think before you post something, because once you post something and it may like have a negative like impact, or it may not like represent the company well, people are going to see that, they're going to negatively react, and then it's not going to go away. So I feel like the main negatives would be like someone like misinterpreting like the health of an animal based off a picture or like the way it's been treated, and then they go and they comment something, or they go share with their friends like this awful picture, and just like it's not because the animal's been mistreated, it's because like the common like general person just doesn't know, they're uninformed on animal nutrition or animal health. So I feel like the main way to just make sure that there aren't any negatives is to really think before you post and put yourself in like the shoes of like someone who isn't like really informed about animal health, and just to make sure you don't upset anybody. But a lot of the positives that can be used, or that could come from using social media to promote a vet's office or a vet company, would be one, that it's a good way to educate the common person, because it's very easy to like put like a picture and like a short comment giving little like tips about like animal husbandry or little like facts about animal nutrition that people may not know. And though it like keeps people from coming into your company. It's a lot more convenient for them, and they will really appreciate like the convenience that is for being able to read that and change their doing and keep their animal healthy versus having to come in and pay money for a visit, which again is not as beneficial for the company, but that goes a long way with the customer. Another positive is that it's a good way to communicate with your customers. If you have any like updates that you may not want to tell each customer in person, posting that to social media so your customers can see, it's a really good way, really fast and convenient way to spread information about your company. Another thing you can do is that just to like spread like the name of your brand. Generally, most people or most like of the common public, they're not going to complain if they see a picture of an animal. They're going to find it like amusing or find it cute. So just posting, like assuming you have the permission of the owners, like posting pictures of animals that a vet's office works on, is a really easy way to just get people interested in your company, because people are going to see this animal. They're going to just be like, well, it's going to grab their attention, and then they're going to look further into what your company does. And that may like be the deciding factor for where they go and bring their animal to get vet care. So it's a very easy way to like promote your company name, and as long as you're safe with what you're posting and you're knowledgeable about, well, as long as you have a good sense of what you're posting and you're not doing something that will negatively impact your company, it's a very good way to get the name out there, to educate the public, and then to just promote your brand and get more customers for your business.
Alright, hello ladies. My name is Jenna. I'm going to be your interviewer today. We're going to be doing a group interview. I'm going to be asking each of you about 3 questions. Take your time answering them, and we'll go ahead and start with you, Alex. So my first question for you is going to be, who do you turn to when you're stressed?
So I don't have that much of a support system here, mainly because no one from my high school, no one that I like knew around from home came over here because I lived in such a small community. But one person that I could really turn to is my best friend Cody. I met him back in high school, and we've been inseparable ever since. He's just been somebody that is like that I could turn to. He easily picks me up when I'm having a bad time. He's been doing it ever since high school, especially in high school. Back in high school, I suffered from, especially in the beginning of high school, I suffered from depression, and he was just always like a bright beaming light in my life. And yeah, he would like just come up and see like if anything's wrong, if something was like going on like at home that was rough. He would always like make sure to check up on me and just like do small little things that would make me smile, and I just appreciated that. And he's also supported me academically because I didn't know if I would be able to go to college or not, and he just really pushed me to apply and to pursue my dreams, and that's something I'm really thankful for that he did. And also he's also encouraged me to like step out of my comfort zone. I used to be really bad at public speaking, and I had a horrible fear of it until one day that we were a part of this program called Teen Court, and basically high school students become attorneys for somebody in a high school that did something bad, but they don't want to press charges against him, but they want to see some kind of punishment like community service or like writing a letter of apology. And Cody usually is an attorney, but I always wanted to try it, but I've been too scared. So he let me tag along with him for once, and he just like pushed me, he let me talk, and I felt really comfortable doing it, and it's just something I'm very grateful for. So yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Alright, Taylor, my next question is for you. How will you decide what vet school you're going to go to?
So I've actually put a lot of thought into this in my ANS 281 class. We've done some time looking into colleges that are around North Carolina or across the country, and even abroad too. that have vet schools. And when I think about applying to vet school, obviously my number one school would be NC State, because I went to NC State for undergraduate school and I loved it. I love the area, I love the community, and I've heard a lot about the NC State vet school and heard that it's a good program, and I've spoke to some of the faculty at the vet school, so I know that that's an option for me. But looking abroad from North Carolina schools, I've looked into like Virginia Tech, maybe Florida. I really do like the South area. However, I am open to going outside of the South, maybe trying something different like the Northwest or something like that, just getting a different vibe than I'm used to, because I've never really lived outside of North Carolina since I've been a child. And I do think it would be interesting to learn from a different type of culture, I guess you could say, since they've grown up in that area, or maybe they've moved there from somewhere else, and just getting a different like outlook on veterinarian medicine other than NC State. But other than looking into the location of the school, I've also thought about cost of the schools, because that's definitely a huge factor for me. I think it's important to think about these things before you just go into vet school and apply to 10 different schools, because they just are somewhere that you want to go. Maybe like Colorado, I would think, I've never been there before, maybe I want to go there for vet school. And I just think it's important to factor in the cost of these places, because once you get there, what happens if you can't afford it? You really need to think about planning in advance so that you can make sure that you can complete vet school if you do get in.
All right, Alex, my next question for you is going to be, what effect will global warming have on veterinary medicine?
So I actually believe global warming has already had a tremendous effect on veterinary medicine. I believe it affects domesticated animals differently than it does wildlife, and it has a greater effect on wildlife than it does domesticated. So when it comes to domesticated animals, such as like your pets, like your dogs and cats, one of the major problems is dehydration. And that's just because it's getting really hot outside. Your dogs like to play. They're not intaking as much water as they are as much as they need. Okay. They're not intaking as much water as they need to be because of the heat. They're panting a lot. So that is actually a pretty big problem. And grooming, along with that, you have to be more up to speed with your grooming, especially with hairy dogs like golden retrievers, to make sure they're able to cool down and giving lots of cold baths. But the main problem is with wildlife animals, and that's mainly because global warming is basically just destroying their whole environment and their way of life. Their habituation is decreasing, deforestation, melting of ice caps. It's all destroying their environment, and along with decreasing their food supply. So, for an example, you could think about polar bears. So polar bears live in like Greenland, very icy places. So, and all that ice is melting. They're used to the cold. They're built for cold weather, and they'll easily get overheated with these increasing temperatures. So, yeah. So they're struggling to survive because of these increasing temperatures, along with the destruction of their environment, and also their food is going away. So polar bears eat fish, right? But these fish, again, like polar bears, are used to these cold temperatures because that's how they adapted to life with it. Is that they live in cold temperatures. So they're either dying because it's getting too hot, the fish, or they're moving up closer to Antarctica where it's colder. So the polar bear's food supply is going away, and it's causing the population of polar bears to decrease. Polar bears is an endangered species, and they are continuing to become more. They're getting more threatened and are almost extinct. They're almost extinct. So I think it's So global warming is a very big problem within the veterinary medicine field, and I believe as veterinarians it is our job to advocate like to educate other people in the public about global warming, because it is something that is affecting our environment and our profession, that it needs to, and if the public doesn't know about this, it's going to continue to get worse, because a lot of global warming is caused by harmful human impacts. So without educating the public, it's just going to increase. So yeah, in order to like try to solve this problem, we need to educate more people about it.
Okay. All right, Taylor, my next question for you is what will you do if you don't get into vet school?
So I've actually put a lot of thought into this, and I think definitely I'll apply to vet school, pick the schools that I think are a fit for me or a match financially, and see how it goes. And if for some reason I was to get rejected from my options, I think I would take that next period and I'll definitely apply again, because I don't like to give up myself. I'm a very determined and motivated person. If I know that I want something, I'm going to try really hard to achieve it. And so I think that taking that next set of time to maybe work at some different clinics, get some more experience, maybe some diverse experience, because most of my animal experience is in small animal medicine. So I think that going forward, maybe I could look into working at a clinic that has equine medicine, or maybe exotic animals, or maybe trying to look for an internship with exotic wildlife or marine animals or something like that, just to get more experience, not only to set myself aside, but to learn more about veterinary medicine and get that experience, which is helpful for vet school. And I think that if for some reason I go through the next cycle and I was to get declined again, I think that I would really have to just sit down and think about what I want for myself, because I know that vet school is something that I do see myself doing, but sometimes you just can't have control over something like that. So I think I would really sit down and maybe talk to my parents, because they always have good advice, and just see if I think that I want to apply again. And I most likely would just give it that third try and see how it goes. And just after that experience, hopefully it will set me aside enough to get accepted.
All right. So Alex, your last question is going to be, what role do veterinarians play in the community?
So I believe the biggest role that veterinarians play in the community, like I said before, is being an advocate for animals. Animals don't speak English. They can't communicate with us, and especially they just communicate with other animals. So veterinarians are basically the closest thing that they have to a human, to like getting their voice out of, to be heard. And I really do believe, so as veterinarians, we have to make sure that these animals are being protected and their voice is being heard. So when it comes to like if an animal who's being abused by their owner comes into the clinic, you notice that something's off, it is your job to take the right steps to remove the animal from the home, to contact the authorities if needed, to make sure that these people do not harm another animal. And also when it comes to endangered species and wildlife, it's your job to advocate for the protection, the health of these animals. It's something that definitely needs to be more publicized, and that the public needs to be educated on, because a lot of these problems is because people don't know what they're doing is harmful when it comes to domesticated and wildlife animals. So I believe as veterinarians, it's our job to go out into the world, educate the public about how to properly take care of these animals, whether it be their own pets, whether we're making better choices to reduce waste, to help better the environment that wildlife animals live in, and just make the world a better place and ensure animals that they have the best life they can.
All right, and Taylor, my last question for you is going to be, how do you deal with stress?
So I think this is an interesting question because we all are probably about the same age. Some may be older than others applying for vet school, but I myself am a college student right now, and with college comes a lot of stress because there's a lot of assignments, a lot of exams, and everything like that, and it's a big adjustment to your social life as well. So whenever I have a very stressful week, like for example, about a month ago, I had a week where I had 4 exams, and obviously I had all my other homework going on as well, and I really just had to sit down and schedule out my week and try to establish what I wanted to get done each day. And once I got that far, I just went through the week with the best attitude that I could and just tried to cross off things as I went. And I just had to tell myself that it was okay if I didn't stick to that exact schedule, but I knew myself and I knew that I'd get everything done, and that at the end of the week that stress would be over and I could not really push it out of my mind because I'm still thinking about those exam scores or maybe those assignment scores. And I just try to take some time to reward myself. So I might take a night, just relax, watch some Netflix, might do a face mask, or maybe go out to eat with my roommates and friends. Or that particular weekend, I actually went home and spent some time with my family and just kind of put school on the back burner for the week and just kind of enjoyed life, I guess you could say, so that I could just have some time to reset, because I knew when I came back the next week I'd have to get back to my normal schedule. But you can't really let that stress affect your schoolwork or your social life. I know it's important to do well in school, and to me it's important to have that time with my friends, but I think it's just about balance and overall like rewarding yourself for the hard work that you're putting in, and knowing when stressing about something for so long is just gets to the point where it's unhealthy and you really have to just move on per se.
All right, well, thank you ladies so much for coming in. You guys both had great responses, and we'll be getting back to you.
Thank you.